instructors, you felt that they brought some value through their information, then give them a good ranking, good valuation.
All right, so Parker's going to be passing out a questionnaire. As Mike was saying, we want to be able to provide some background and feedback to the IDA for the upcoming Marine training certification that should be coming in the near future. So if you wouldn't mind to fill that out, when you give it back to us at the front, we're going to have a raffle at the end for a few items. So definitely make sure you give that back up to the front before the end.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so while he's passing out, my name is Mike Phillips. I work for AutoGeek. I teach 2 detailing classes. I teach automotive and I teach marine. Parker has been through my marine detailing class. That's how we first met. And of course I shared this in the first class, but when I teach car detailing and I teach boat detailing, I don't bring anything nice in. I purposely go out and look for the worst condition vehicles and cars, because then I can show you the most, so you can take home the most practical and hands-on knowledge from the experience. And I never bring in a white boat. I would never bring a white boat, and they're so easy. Everybody has a white boat. So I find dark colored gel coat boats that have physically turned white, like you see here on this blue side of the hull here. And then I teach a complete restoration process in my boat detailing class. I only teach this once a year. It's coming up the first weekend of February. So it's February 9th and 10th, or 10th and 11th, whatever that Saturday and Sunday is. This year I have a 24-foot, God, I can't, on my PowerPoints I got pictures of all the boats. And if you're in any of my other classes the rest of the day, I have pictures of the boats you're going to work on, but they're incredibly horrible shape. So they're very hands-on. In fact, you hardly sit down at all, do you, Willie? You've been to a bunch of my classes. There's just no sitting. You're on your feet, and that's how you learn the best. Ben, why don't you go ahead and share your background, your title.
Sure. So I started out in the 2007 in the commercial industrial chemical world. Did sales and marketing for Big Fortune 5. Pretty much did all those 10 years out in the field. 2 of those years was actually here at Walt Disney full time, so did restoration projects for them in the parks and the resorts, building facades, public common areas, you name it. Got inspired back then to get into the restoration side. Started my own business about 4 years ago, and been primarily focused on the marine side. And it's been pretty exciting. It's taken me a lot of different places. Spent over a month in Spain doing a 20 lifeboat restoration project for Disney Cruise Line. Came home for a day and a half, went right back to Malta. That was with TUI Cruise Lines. Did all the jacuzzis on the top deck. Saw the fiberglass repair and gel coat for that. And then now been primarily focused in the United States, training different marine contractors, detailers, restoration experts on how to be more proficient, more profitable in their business, consolidating products, improving process and procedures overall. So it's been pretty exciting. And like I said, been with Parker 4 times already this past year, and definitely taught me a lot as well.
So my name is Parker Richards. I own and operate Colorado Boat Detailing out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Been detailing 15 years. Started out in a hot rod shop, wet sanding, cut correction, all that good stuff. Started progressing into boats, and it's really just every year has gotten more crazy and crazy. Initially was doing 25, 30 boats a year. Now doing over 340, 350 a year. Anything from mold and mildew remediation, mitigation to sand cut, buff, interiors, all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. It's in a weird place in Colorado. There's not that many lakes. There's a ton of boats, and so it's an interesting market. But we have a lot of fun with it, and that's kind of my overall background. So it's a lot of fun.
Very good. So why should you get into marine detailing overall? A couple facts there. I believe most people, if we had a show of hands, how many people are more into the automotive space right now than they are marine? So that's like 95% of everybody here. So why you should get into it then, it's very important. So over 12 million recreational boats registered in the US. Obviously it's not as many cars, but it's still a good amount of actual boats overall. More than 70% are this design here, an outboard style, so outboard boat if you're not familiar. And then they're gonna be within that 26-foot length overall. So they're gonna be trailer style boats. So you're not talking boats that are in a wet slip, in a marina. Basically, they don't come out of the water. You're talking average boats that are towed behind a truck or SUV or whatnot. 95% of all Americans are within 1 hour of navigable water, meaning it's a large enough body of water that you could drive a boat in. So there's a lot of opportunity there. You figure the disposable income that you have to have a boat, these are not cheap to maintain. A lot of maintenance goes on. You got the registration, tax tag, all that type of stuff that goes on with having a boat as well. Most people have a daily driver car, but it's less people obviously that have a boat as well for that extra expense. So being that a lot of people here are in the automotive space versus marine, real big differences with cars, mostly base coat, clear coat that you're dealing with. Boats, it's gonna be gel coat, which is that panel over here. That's from a late 60s Cobia boat, and that's original gel coat from that boat. It's never been touched before, so I got that panel from the original owner who's never touched that boat. And he wanted to get rid of it, and I hacked it up with a chainsaw. So that's why it's here. Film layer on base coat, clear coat, could anywhere between 3/4 of a mil now, right? New Toyotas, Hondas, they're getting thinner and thinner. You have less material to work with. Older cars be closer to that 2 mil mark. Film layer on gel coat, 15 to 20 mils. And I don't know if I know Mike has said this in the past, where clear coat would be equivalent to like a cigarette plastic wrapper, where if you're thinking more 20 mils, you're thinking of about the thickness of a credit card, thinner than that. So still relatively thin, but thicker than clear coat. So here's a real big difference too, is in cars, right? Someone's gonna be in that car much more often than they are on a boat, right? If it's a daily driver, that owner's walking around that car almost every day. They're seeing it every square inch, go to the gas station underneath the fluorescent lights, things like that. Boat owner, 10 days a year on average. So you have all that expense in a boat. Parker, they specialize in boat sales out there in Denver. They have surf boats, like wakeboard, ski style boats, $180,000 boats that get towed behind a truck.
That we use for 3 months in Colorado. That's about the length of our season. It can be a little longer, but generally the weather, about 3 to 4 months, and that's it.
And I grew up in Oregon, and I owned a Sanger drag boat for 20 years. And I had a lot of friends that would buy boats. And as a guy that owned a boat that lives in a state that rains 9 months out of the year, you got 3 months of sun. Here's what I would share with them. Look, you got 3 months is 12 weekends, right? Am I doing math right?
Yeah.
So every weekend you don't go to the lake, that's a weekend you don't get to go to the lake. So you gotta get your tow vehicle, you gotta get your boat, get your beer cooler. You gotta be ready to go and get to the lake, because before you know it, summer's over. You know, and to 12 weekends, you know, if you miss a couple, that's only 10 weekends, you know, 1 day or 2 days or 3 days if you take Friday off. So, yeah, so boat's very limited. Then it goes back into storage for the rest of the year.
It'd be winterized, especially out where Parker is up north, things like Michigan. Michigan's huge for boats. They have more bodies of water than they know what to do with up there. But it's just the fact that it's to really point that you have such a limited amount of time, but you have such the expense. It makes sense in a vehicle, right, for a daily driver. Once again, it's practical, you're using it every day. This is strictly recreation. It's strictly discretionary, disposable style income, actually, right? It's just really recreation. You have fun money to do it. So the point is, when it comes time to sell services and upsell things like that, generally a boat owner, especially with a newer, nicer boat like they sell out there with Parker, it's not going to be as much of an issue versus a daily driver, like an older Honda Civic per se or whatnot.
And here's the financial impact. Because again, when I was in Oregon, in the springtime, they have the Portland Boat Show. Everybody goes up there, and if you got good credit, you can get a boat real easy. And then you take it out in the summertime, and then all of a sudden it comes October, November, you park it, and now you're making that huge payment, and that boat's just sitting there. And man, that's when you see a lot of guys go, oh shit, man, I gotta sell my boat. You just can't use it. It's just a huge expense.
You've got the spouse or whatnot in your ear saying, what are we spending $500 a month for?
Exactly.
You're still paying insurance on the boat, everything else, and it literally is just sitting there in heated climate controlled storage or whatnot, being winterized. So it's a whole different conversation versus, once again, the practicality of a daily driver car. So to give you an idea of that. So this is something maybe it hasn't been seen before. This comes from my chemical industrial background for those commercial industrial chemicals. So whether it comes to 5 factors of restoration. You could replace restoration with cleaning, 5 factors of cleaning. So basically we're saying in this pie chart, without getting really technical, is that each one of these 5 plays a key critical role in cleaning. And that's automotive, doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, it could be floor cleaning, it could be anything. This all applies. So if we were to break this down, you'd say mechanical is, are you scrubbing, are you grinding, are you wiping? It's whatever motion that you're applying to that surface. Paint, glass, carpet, doesn't matter. So say, we'll just use carpet, because automotive, right? So carpet mechanical could be, are you using a brush to scrub a spot? Are you using a microfiber towel to wipe? Could be the DA style brushes that you use on a quarter cable or old cyclo, things like that. Time is how much time are you actually using that action or allowing the chemical to dwell on that surface. So that's where the time portion comes in. If you want something to work really instantaneously, or do you want to allow that product to dwell? Are you going to give it a lot of mechanical agitation or a little bit? Pressure, obviously how much pressure do you apply to a surface? If you had a garden hose or are you using a pressure washer? Just use that analogy with that. Temperature being, are you using a steam cleaner? Are you using hot water for solution? Are you using cold water? And then chemical, on what strength, what type of chemical are you using? If you're using something equivalent to like a neutral-based detergent, say more like a Dawn, just an auto car wash soap, things like that, versus a degreaser, much more powerful, right? High pH, high alkalinity. So this will make sense here, where the left side would be APC, all-purpose cleaner, versus cold water. So APC is decently strength chemical, so this piece of the pie is a little bit larger. And then you have cold water. So the temperature side gets a little bit smaller, but remember before, they were all 20% mark, right? So to adjust this, over here on this side, just regular soap, like Dawn or car wash soap. Chemical's weaker, but my temperature, I'm using warm water, my temperature is increased. So the whole point of this is to just use in your mind moving forward. Maybe I don't have the particular chemical I want on hand, but I gotta do something, I got a job in front of me. Or my hot water pressure washer went down. What am I gonna do? It's a balance of scale of what can you do to compensate for what you're trying to do on hand. Or maybe you're working on something really gentle. Maybe you can't apply a lot of mechanical action because you don't want to harm the surface. What do I need to do? Maybe I let the chemical have a little bit more dwell time. Maybe I use hot water instead of cold water. So just keep that in mind. And it does not matter, once again, what substrate, what surface, carpet, glass, gel coat, paint, you name it. If you want to think about polishing real quick, you could say time, arm speed, right? Your mechanical is how fast your tool speed is. Pressure, arm pressure against the surface. Chemical would be what compound or polish you're using. And then temperature in that particular case is, are you doing it in the sun? Are you doing it in shade? Are you getting the surface hot with your tool? Think about that. So that all applies. General idea of chemistry of cleaning. This is important just so you can get a general primer. We won't get in too deep with it, but acid, so think like a wheel brightener, aluminum brightener, that's going to be acid, that's on your low pH scale. Oxidizer being bleach. OxyClean would be an oxygen style bleach. Hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizer. Alkaline being like a degreaser, APC, those are normally on the high pH. And solvents being like acetone, lacquer thinner, things like that. And this will make sense coming up here in the future as well. So when you're thinking of what chemical you're going to pick up, each particular category here has a particular soluble soil that's going to go after. You use acids for hard water spots. Your hard water spot mineral removers or whatnot are always generally on the acid side. Solvents, you think of like Goo Gone, things like that. If you want to get rid of gum, tar, grease, mineral spirits, perfect ideal for bug and tar, things like that. This is a real big key. We're not going to spend too much time on it either. This is something I really want you all to research. It's very, very important, but it is a little bit on the technical side. But having an SDS, the safety data sheet, they used to be called material safety data sheets. In our side of the business back in the day, when I was doing this day to day in the chemical business, you had to have this particular paper for every particular chemical on site in your facility per OSHA. You could have serious problems by not having this on site. They can come in and do an inspection, and you really have a lot of answering to do if you don't have it for every single product. If they wanted to, they could come and visit a detail shop, a reconditioning facility, and ask for this. Because you're in business, it's commercial, you're using chemicals day in and day out. So do business with a chemical company, whoever you're buying products from, ask for that SDS, become familiar with what products you're using. This has all the information you need to know about safety, disposal, environmental, you name it, it's there. And you can go to plenty of different websites that will teach you how to understand it. But the big key here, 30 seconds would be, is let's just take this particular product. It's sold in major big box stores. It's gonna tell you on that SDS, what's the composition. I know the people in the back may not be able to see, but it's saying that it's a petroleum distillate. 70 to 80% content weight is 70 to 80% of that petroleum distillate. Less than 10% is carnauba wax. So it tells you right there, it's like a recipe, if you will. Now, not every SDS, not every product will let you know what's in there, because it only has to list what is hazardous to you, the environment, things like that. But this just gives a decent idea. And if you say, well, I don't know what a petroleum distillate is, you come right here, CAS, a CAS number, take that number, you plug it right into Google, it will tell you everything you need to know in layman's terms. It's not gonna be real high technical, you have to have some organic chemistry degree, double doctorate, you don't. But you should be familiar with this, because when it comes down to these physical and chemical properties, you can know if it's VOC right here, volatile organic compounds, it's saying that 74% is basically gonna flash off. So you bought a product, say this costs $20. Out of $20, 74% of that's going in thin air. By the way, what is that doing for the environment, health and safety overall? That plays a big key part. What it is you're trying to use. So back to the marine detailing specifically, what is gel coat and why is it used? This is, once again, an SDS, so it's still a chemical. Gel coat being applied to the surface tells you what's in here. Polyester resin, styrene, these two react together to make basically the plastic, because that's what a gel coat is. But what's interesting here is it says there's talc. 18% or less is talc. That's a filler. It's basically like baby powder, if you will, for a rough analogy. That's different than working with clear coat. So when you're polishing a surface on an old gel coat boat, you say, well, there's dust, there's this and that coming off, it's all oxidation. Well, in this particular situation, if you're using this particular gel coat, you could have that talc is coming off too. It's built into the gel coat. So it's not necessarily just dust from the compound or polish. There's fillers in gel coat. So the reason why boat builders use this is because it's a very cheap material, right? Mass production, it's gotta be cheap. It's very durable. It's efficient to use because the way they build boats. You could do some searching on YouTube and why that's important of how they build a boat, why they need to use gel coat versus paint. If you were to use paint on a boat, you would actually have to build the boat first, pop it out of the mold, and then paint it. It's almost impossible to go paint a boat while you're building it. So that creates redundancy. It's not as efficient for them. They can spray gel coat in the mold first, build the boat with the fiberglass, everything else in the mold, pop it out. That's why another reason of why they use gel coat. And it's fairly easily to repair. What causes gel coat to oxidize? This is a boat that Parker and I did. This is, I believe it was a 03.
03 Centurion, yeah.
03. So you can see that this is fairly shiny up here. Down here, this is all oxidized. And you can see this kind of transition line because the rub rail and the boat cover comes down below here. There would be a canvas cover that would cover this. So all this area here and below was exposed to the sun. So you can tell, you'd say, maybe the sun has quite a bit to do with the UV aspect to cause it to oxidize. So the main reasons, UV number one, hotter climates, temperature definitely plays an effect. So if you were to keep a boat more in climate controlled condition versus outside in the heat, that's gonna play a big part. And also water, a lot of moisture actually causes issues with gel coat. You can look up, if you like to write this note down, look up gel coat osmosis. It causes issues with blisters, things like that. It's not designed actually to be in the water full time. So this gel coat down here in the bottom, so this is the water line, this gray line here. A boat like this is not designed to sit in the water full time. You need to have bottom paint on and things like that. It will actually cause blisters, and that's an issue with it in itself.
I just add real quick,
Sure.
Water is also known as a universal solvent. You can use it to dissolve dirt, it'll turn it into mud. If you throw a newspaper into a bucket of water and come back in a week, it dissolves the paper. So anything, if you sit in a hot tub for an hour, what happens to you? You start to dissolve, you soften up. So it's a universal solvent, or and also I use this analogy for people in the car world, but also the boat world, because I'm in South Florida. A lot of people, my area go fishing. How many people have been out here in Florida a day fishing? How many people that are holding their hands up, not wear a long sleeve shirt? What happened to your skin in one day? One day, your neck. Burn bad, don't you? Well, your boat gets burnt every single day. Your car. The sun is horrific. And so is water when you add the factor of time.
Gel coat is definitely more susceptible to UV than clear coat, especially in the years past. They're working on this as far as the gel coat manufacturers to add more UV inhibitors and UV absorbers. So they're trying to incorporate more in that, but once again, it's about the cost of this material for these boat builders. So Mike's made a really great point about that as far as shielding itself. So if you were a boat owner or for your customer and say, well, what can I do to make my boat stay shinier longer? How can I maintain it easier? Put a cover on it, put it in the shade, put it under an overhang, put it somewhere so it's not fully exposed, because it is very susceptible to this oxidation if you just leave it out. And that's the issue, that if you were to get into larger boats, the ones that stay in the water all the time, a wet slip, say something over 60 feet for sure, that boat is always exposed. Sure, there's some marinas that have covered slips, if you will, but that boat is always getting hammered by the UV light and the weather and elements. Cars, once again, coming from the automotive side, how many of them are in garages, especially if you're dealing with nice cars? They're not going to let a McLaren's P1 sit outside all day. But yet you're still dealing with a boat that can easily cost more than a McLaren P1, and it has to sit outside all day. It's a totally different dynamic with just the way these boats are stored, and there's really nothing that you can do about that just because of the size of it. There's nowhere to put it. There's an inherent problem with gel coat that they're trying to work on as well, is porosity. This is really zoomed in. It says magnification of 400 times, pretty high powerful microscope there. So you have this porosity issue. This is basically a void. And that's what's all going on here in this panel here. When it gets oxidized, we'll see in the upcoming slide. But that's how you can get water intrusion issues in itself, because that porosity is just there. And that makes it really interesting when you polish this versus a clear coat surface that's a lot tighter. It doesn't have near the porosity. Here's another example. Parker and I just had to deal with this not too long ago.
You see it a lot of older Malibus, Rinkers, Sea Rays. It looks like someone has gone through and put little tiny pinholes in the surface, and you go to polish it and nothing really happened. Even wet sand it and then cut it and then polish it. Still, nothing happened.
So
that's basically what's shown. That one on the left is showing it.
So you'll see that coming up, and Parker makes a great point with that, is that we just dealt with this. You can wet sand it all you like, and sometimes it actually makes the problem worse. So you're literally just keep digging and digging into what's happening here. You're getting thinner and thinner in gel coat, and it's what is happening? And it's just the porosity. It's from the manufacturer. It's nothing that you did. It's not your polishing procedure, trying to compound or anything. It's an inherent issue with gel coat. So once again, it literally looks like pinpricks all over. I mean, this is just a very small sample, like a couple inches by a couple inches. They are trying to add, this is an additive called Cipronat, they're putting into the gel coat to reduce that porosity. You can see there's a lot less of these specks than over here. But don't feel like it's your issue. I mean, you can only get it as good as you can. You can't remove this porosity. It's built into the gel coat. So this is a cross section. So if you imagine if you were to take that panel, flip it on its side, this is what it would look like, really zoomed in here 100 times. And so this would be basically the fiberglass laminate, right, the structure, and then you're getting into the gel coat, and this would be the surface layer. So here would be the atmosphere, the air, the very, very top surface. And you can see it almost looks like a sponge. And what they would call this in our side of the business, restoration and whatnot, these are all reactive sites. See, like right up here in the tip or whatnot, they start to look almost like carpet fibers. Well, that becomes a real big issue for why this oxidation happens, because once again, each one of these little places is a spot for water, UV and whatnot to react with the gel coat. So what are we trying to do in this business? Why is this important when we're trying to restore? You're trying to take all these and just cut them right off. That's really the easiest way to say it. You're trying to level this out 100% and remove those reactive sites. So why is this really important here is if you don't, you go up to this surface here and you try to throw cleaner wax on it and just shine it up or whatnot. if you do that, people would say, you look on forums or whatnot, well, why did it come back and oxidize so quickly? Well, you didn't remove these reactive sites, and wax and even sealants, they're not there to really, even though they're hydrophobic and they'll bead up, they're actually still permeable to water vapor. So it's still gonna react a lot faster because you did not remove these sites. You need a flat surface so you'll extend it. So you actually need to get it back to a real shiny surface first before you wax or seal it, and that's what's gonna provide the length of time for what it is you did for that customer. If you just try to throw a cleaner wax or whatnot on an oxidized surface, it could be days and it would just come back because you did not remove these reactive sites there. And that would be more of a technical term, but that's really what it is. You have to take that off.
Yeah, so just using say a cleaner wax, there's a lot of marine cleaner waxes, that'd be like a very topical fix. You don't go to the root or deep to the problem. Dr. David Gadusi, he's a PhD organic chemist who owns Optimum Polymer Technologies. Maybe 10 years ago, one time I was talking to him about polishing car paint. The same thing applies to gel coat. And he said, in real simple terms, a smooth surface will last longer than a rough surface. And it's because as soon as you have a rough surface like this, you actually have more surface area that's exposed versus if that was completely planed off and smooth. So getting that surface as smooth as you can and then sealing it will give it a better chance of lasting longer versus having it all opened up like that.
So that exactly brings us into this slide here of, this would be the oxidized surface, the rough surface that Mike's referring to right now with Dr. G. See how these linear lines, these straight lines here, that would be equivalent to you when you're polishing something, right? You're gonna create those linear lines. Even though a swirl looks like a spider web or whatnot, they look concentric or whatnot, they're actually straight lines in a lot of ways. So, excuse me, those would be your polishing buffing marks here. This down here, it looks all nice and even. That was when you would finish out the surface, a nice, smooth, even surface. So once again, if you were to say, well, I have an oxidized surface, if I were to wax it, you're just waxing this. I mean, a cleaner wax has some, depending on what cleaner wax, there's variations, but Mike can attest to this, is that there are some that are more aggressive than others as far as the cut that they provide. There could be the abrasive package in there, could have some aluminum oxide that you would have maybe in a regular polish, and they add it to the wax formulation. There could be others that are very, very mild. But nonetheless, you're not gonna get the type of correction to get to here with a cleaner wax that you would if you actually were to wet sand or to actually cut and buff it, if you will, with like a rotary and wool pad. So if you want your surface to last, once again, you really need to remove this oxidation, smooth out the surface first. Know that if I'm gonna actually restore it before I wax or seal to get it to last, it needs to basically be like that center section here before I put wax and seal on. And the gel coat, if it can be restored, which we'll get into, it needs to look like that before you put wax and seal on. It really does. It will get shiny like that if there is pigment and enough film build there to restore. So remind yourself of that. Oh, I'm just gonna slap something on here. If it looks like the left side and you slap something on, it's gonna be very, very temporary, very superficial type of fix. So this is a crude analogy. What Mike was just speaking to with Dr. G, you wanna make a smooth surface. So imagine a waffle pad is the oxidized surface. You have all these reactive sites. You look at a foam pad, you have these open cells or whatnot. You're trying to turn it into a plane of glass. Very crude analogy, but that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to level this off and turn it into a nice flat plane of glass. A lot less reactive sites, a lot less places that the UV, once again, the water, dirt, and soils can penetrate. I mean, think of it if it's a fishing boat or if it's a surf boat. It's less places for sand, soils, fish blood if it's a fishing boat to penetrate and get stuck in. So you want to make it as flat and hard and dense of a surface because the oxidative side here is also relatively soft because of those open sites. So microscopically, it's soft. How do you know if gel coat can be restored? You go up to a clear coat surface on a car, you get it wet, you see a little bit of a transformation. But on gel coat, this is simply, once again, kind of like an older surface like this. You can go up to it and literally, maybe not the most sanitary, but you could lick your finger and wipe it. That's exactly what was done here. And you can tell if that pigment comes back, if you get a color transformation, you have a pretty good shot, the vast majority of the chance that it can be brought back. So that is just an easy test. You don't want to lick your finger, take some water, splash it on there, wipe it with your hand. But spit seems to work really, really good for this test. So, what's that? Heat it a little up, exactly. 5 factors of clean, there we go. Heat up that spit a little bit before you put it on there. So this is just like dirt and soils, things like that, but just wiping it with the spit, you can see it kind of accumulates here. But then once again, if that color comes back, so I'll do it right here if you want, is the fact that if it brings back that color just like that, that's how you know this can be brought back. Same exact gel coat. It brought that color back, you know it can be restored. And I would say that's literally over 90% chance that it can be. So when your customer comes up and say, man, this boat, like, I don't know what to do with it, I just got it, it looks like garbage, can you make it look better? Do that test, feel pretty confident that you can help them if you get that color change. So I'll let Parker speak to this here with the tools and buffing.
In tools and buffing, we use rotary, we use DA. Obviously, we prefer 4-ply wool on the rotary, but also we notice ourselves using, I'm a flex guy personally, but Mike will always say, use what? Use whatever machine works best for you, right?
Use what you're an expert with.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as you would say, and so on the rotary, flex, Makita, Rupes, whatever it's going to be, whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever you're an expert on. On the DA, I like the flex because it's force driven. Rupes has the Millet now, it's just force driven as well. But there are still times where on some dealer boats, you will see us pull out a porter cable. And
sometimes you just really don't need that cut.
you just don't need the cut that a 3401 would provide, being that it's a force driven machine. Diminishing compounds and polishes, when we're trying to get a cut on gel coat, if I'm not using a diminishing polish, like think of old 3M, black label that has really bad dusting. You're still gonna have some dusting on a diminishing compound, say like in this Roar 910, but you're gonna have a much faster cut and a cleaner cut opposed to an older compound. And then wool and foam pads, take your pick. I mean, we use anything from Rupes to Lake Country Manufacturing, and who knows what. I mean, we get into a lot of different pads. So again, personal preference comes into, what are you working on, what is appropriate. If I'm doing a brand new Centurion, a 2019, 257, I'm not gonna pull out a wool and a rotary to zip that boat. I don't need it. A lot of times, pull out the 3401, light touch up and go, but we always say take the road, less traveled as far as, I don't need to break out a rotary if I don't have to, especially in a brand new boat. Yes?
How about synthetic wool or regular wool? What do you recommend on that?
It depends on the surface. I hate, we're not supposed to be talking about brands, but certainly there are brands that have synthetic wool, Lake Country, the purple. It really just depends on how oxidized the boat is. If it's not so bad, then that will kind of lead me in that direction. If it is bad, I'm looking for heavier cut, and that will certainly change the, what pad I'm actually going to use. But that's again where you got to know your customers, you got to know your boats, your market. How hammered are they? Do you go up to a boat and look at it? We've had some just when he was out in Denver a couple months ago. You look at it, it doesn't look that bad, and we start cutting on it, and we're like, oh man, we're
Peel the makeup off, so to speak, as we'd say, right? Because you don't know what's underneath this oxidized surface until you take it off. There could be a lot of finer scratches underneath there. You don't really know until you actually do that first cut and see what you're doing. That test spot that Mike always professes that you should do, which would be after the spit test, then do a test spot, see what you're working with, right? That way you can say, look, here's a square foot section. Do I want to use this really aggressive method? Or another good point that Mike makes is least aggressive method first. We would always do that in the chemical world. Always least aggressive. You're just making more work for yourself if you dive right into the aggressive method first and you don't need it, right? So go do your test spot and see what you can do. And I like on a boat, being that it's a large surface area, it's do about a square foot. I mean, 2x2 is a pretty common. You can do that, so that'd be equivalent to 4 square feet. And then how long did that take me? And then duplicate that in your mind doing math. How many square feet are in this boat? It's rough. I mean, an average boat, once again, is 26 feet or less. So let's say it's 25 feet. The hull sides are 2 feet tall. So 25 times 2, that's 50 square feet on this side, 50 square feet on the other side. You do your transom, the back of the boat. You got a little bit over the rub rail area, and then do your math and duplicate that hour. You do your time function for labor and whatnot.
the one thing I was gonna add on, certainly, I mean, on the rotary and the DA, where I'm at in Colorado, average day in the summertime, 10% humidity, very dry. So what am I doing when I'm doing boats, polishing of any kind, DA or rotary? A little bit of O&R, whatever your choice is, and then spur. That will lubricate the pad, you know, you're keeping the heat generation down, because we're, like I say, if it's 95 degrees in Fort Collins and 10% humidity, I'm trying to, you know, rotary a boat, I'm gonna generate some heat really quick. So always keep that in mind. Always spray your pads, keep them clean. It will make your pads last longer, it will make your cut better. And you're setting yourself up. Every step you do, you're setting yourself up into the next step. So if I keep my pad clean, I'm spurring, I'm keeping it cool, what happens when I get to polishing? I'm setting myself up for success by the steps that I create.
I just like to interject a couple things on when it comes to buffing out boats too. A friend of mine bought a brand new cobia, and brand new had buffer strips.
Oh yeah,
So at the factory, as archaic as it is, they're using wool pads on rotaries to finish these things. Now, back to his point, if you buff the side of that gel coat with a wool pad, fibers are abrasives, they're spitting against it, you're not leaving a perfectly flat surface, you're opening it up for more oxidation. You can go to Google and type in holograms in gel coat, add Mike Phillips, and you'll probably pull up the only article in the world on the problem with holograms in gel coats, and it's the norm for the industry. In my classes, I don't teach that. I teach cutting starting with it, but then we switch over to the flex and finish out with foam pads. But here's another thing. Gel coats, unless it's like you see the center section there where it's already smooth and shiny, you could use a soft foam pad, a foam polishing, a foam finishing, or foam waxing to machine apply a sealant or a wax to that. Besides that, any other time you're using foam, gel coat really likes a hard foam. It is like a foam cutting pad for polishing. If you finish out with a wool pad and a rotary and a compound, you got a pretty good shine going, and you go to a polish and a soft foam pad, you will dull that surface down. And in my boat detailing book, I explain I don't know why, and I can't find anybody that can explain to me why gel coat don't like soft foam, but it don't like it. So in our class, we finish out with foam cutting pads.
Oh yeah.
We finish out with like the Rupes blue, the Rupes green, or the Lake Country orange. That's our finishing pad, not a soft pad. So it's a different mentality for working on cars.
So that leads right there to what Mike just said. There is that pad right there. CarPro Flash Pad, not to just the fact that it's an example. Use what you like, but that's a very, very firm pad. I mean, you can soften it up if you know, wet it, dampen it, or whatnot. But that speaks to Mike's point 100%. That's what you want to finish. This is tools and products used for waxing and sealing. That's really what it likes towards the end there.
So we get a lot of flack for the new finish slide there, and it's funny because it does actually work. I have it on boats at the dealership so we have a lake at our dealership, and we do a lot of testing there, and we have several boats that have new finish on them, and it does work. You get guys and customers, guys, gals, whoever, they'll come in and like, I want the boat done, but you know, on a budget, whatever. Well, I'm not into turning down work, so I'm gonna give them an option, and the new finish is certainly an option for them. Is it the best option? No. But will it work for a while? Yes. And will you see results? I mean, I got guys that use it and then will come back with, you know, a topper, they'll spray some kind of spray sealant or whatever just to, you know, keep the gloss up. But don't see that and laugh. We actually do have that on boats, and it does work.
It's just the fact that it comes out there, that it's really it's recognizable, right? It's been around forever, the commercials and whatnot.
55 car washes and it's still being watered. What the hell is that tape? I want that tape that holds up for the 55 car washes.
Yeah.
It's
Here's what that is though. It's like technically what that is a cleaner sealant. So in the last class we talked about a cleaner wax. So something that'll clean, polish, and protect in one step. That's wax based. That's a cleaner sealant. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but in my life I've written a lot about cleaner waxes or AIOs. And when you go to any automotive parts store or any boat supply store, the majority of the waxes or sealants there are going to be cleaner waxes or cleaner sealants. They might not say right on it, like Meguiar's has a product called cleaner wax for boats. It says right on it, cleaner wax. This says new finish. But if you read the side panel, here's what it says. removes oxidation. Boom, it's a cleaner wax. A finishing wax, a show car wax, wouldn't say that. You gotta put it on something like in the center of that. So anyway, new finish, you know, forget the name. What that is technically that's an AIO. It's a cleaner sealant. It's just a non-abrasive one. So it's chemical only, solvents and chemical cleaners in there.
So that's what's just really interesting in the fact that just the recognition why we put it there, it does work. There are other synthetic that would be under synthetic sealants that's in there. This one here, this butt wax that we saw earlier in the SDS is more of a natural wax, has the Carnauba. I'm sure it has a few other things, but it would classify as a natural wax. Once again, DA could do it with a 3401, with a firm pad. You could do it with Porter cable. You could do it with whatever tool, but normally it's a DA. You can still do it with that firm pad. Once again, as Mike said, if it was in the center section, more times than not, it's still going to be one of those firmer pads. Blue Root Pads, CarPro Flash, something like that, along those lines, for sure. So here's just some actual buffing, polishing, and sealing tips. This is a boat that we did down in Southwest Florida. I don't know if you know, anybody here know Andy Cool? Anybody know Andy Cool?
Andy, be cool.
Andy B. Cool, that's right. So, nonetheless, this is an older boat here. The photo's trying to show up, but this is really, really dull. This is inside, obviously not the same lighting, but it's supposed to be a yellow boat. That's the point. So this is blue, but this is yellow. It's the same type of effect. So really big key that would help you out a lot if you came up across a boat like this. You say, man, I don't even know if I want to touch that boat. That just looks terrible. Most people in here are doing automotive, right? And you get your first customer to bring you a boat like that, and you're, what am I getting into? Something that would really help first is using a higher alkalinity, thinking like a high pH APC or degreaser. If you wash that boat down with that particular product first, that loves to remove oxidation. Those type of products, APC or degreaser, really helps strip that off, so you'll just see it just literally run off the side of that boat. You can do that with a Scotch-Brite white pad if it's really bad. It shouldn't really leave too deep of scratches that you would have to remove later, but that works really well, and you don't have to dig, you can just use it. Once again, those 5 factors of clean, that's your mechanical action, your pressure, how much you want to push on it, but you don't have to dig. So just use that with your APC degreaser. That's also really big key, because if you were to try to go in there and just wash that boat and get your general soils off without taking the oxidation off, you're going to spur your wool pad that much more often. You're going to have that much more dust. Because guess what? That oxidation has to go somewhere. It's going to go in your pad. Then you spur it, and it's like a snowball effect in there. It's terrible. So wash it off first, remove the majority of it, then come into your rotary wool and compound step. That's going to make your life a lot easier.
I got a cheater technique for that, and if you guys don't like this technique, you can, I won't hurt my feelings. But when I get stuff like that, and I do this with old single stage paint on cars too. I just wrote an article about it this last year, but I'll take Comet, wash it with Comet and the Scotch-Brite, and you'll peel 95% of that loose stuff off.
That's a really good tip. Another one that works really well is Barkeeper's Friend, right? Because that's oxalic acid based. That works really well on rust stains or whatnot. Parker, if you check out his Instagram, he's got a really good photo of removing rust off white gel coat. And Barkeeper's Friend, that oxalic acid active ingredient there, really does a great job on that. So when you see rust stains come out of what these would be called like a through-hole fitting, these little stainless steel fittings, or here it's plastic, you'll see rust come right below that white plastic fitting right there. Barkeeper's Friend is amazing for that.
And the Scotch pad together?
Yeah, white Scotch-Brite pad would be excellent for that. And you might have to get a little bit of dwell time, let it work. Use warm water with it, make almost like a slurry, and put it on there. So it'd be sticky, and let it sit there for a little bit, and then scrub it. So
Quickly on client expectations, if I had $1 for every time I get a phone call that says it's not that bad, I wouldn't be standing here today. So, always walk around consultations in person with the boat, with the client. Understand where they're coming from. A lot of clients call and say, I just need a wash and wax. Well, I'm looking at the boat and I know that a wash and wax, it looks like this, not gonna fix that. So, we're trying to educate the client and tell them, that's not gonna work, but this is what's going to work, and this is my steps that I'm gonna do to get there. And make sure you convey to them and help them understand that just a wash and wax isn't gonna do that, because we run into that a lot, and you will alleviate a lot of problems right off the bat doing that full walk around. You have your sheet with you, you go around, I'm looking for, scratches that are already there, damage to the boat that I did not do, so that they can't try to blame me later, do that whole thing. But client expectations, make sure that you guys are always on the same page, because it's something that we run into a lot. Oh, the boat's great, it's brand new, it's a 2015, it's not that bad, and you get it, and it's crazy scale, scratch, dock crash, whatever, so.
Let me just touch on that not that bad. Also, the other thing you can do, because the boat detailing industry is very archaic, it's very caveman. And you have guys that'll go around to boat yards or calling people, and they'll buff out that oxidized boat with a wool pad and a one-step cleaner wax, and they'll make it shiny, but they just put hologram scratches in, so now it's gonna oxidize, it's gonna come right back. So you'll offer to do it the right way at this price, they'll offer to do it right this way at a lower price. This is gonna be the better deal. A lot of guys that go for this deal, and in Rennie Doyle's book, How to Start a Detailing Business, I have a section in there, and it says, Mike, if you had to go back and do things over again, what would you do? And I says, I would learn the art of turning work down. Because sometimes you're better off to, hey, if that customer wants the cheap guy, let him have it, because I ain't gonna do the cheap work and hurt my reputation.
And you're gonna hate yourself the whole time you're doing that
You're gonna
job.
hate it. And most guys that own boats, they have no idea how long it's gonna take you to do the longest step, the compounding step. It's hours of usually hard pushing. And back to your other note, your comment about inspecting the boat. At the end of the day, I have a class that talks about inspecting cars before you work on them as a form of insurance, so you can document pre-existing damage so you don't get blamed for it.
I took a photo of every boat, front and back, serial number and trailer number. We do some insurance work, and if I ever have to go to a court and talk to an adjuster about whether or not I did that or not, and you know, I'll show adjusters my photo documentation right up front. I got all that information. They can never argue a timestamp photo.
Yep.
You know, protect yourself.
It's really invaluable, it really is.
Next, I think we're getting close at the time here.
I was trying to think, there was a good point with that, the expectations and whatnot, though, is, definitely walk around that boat and inspect it, though, for sure, like Parker was saying, that it's just huge. So many people end up getting nailed because it's such a large surface area, they're not on the boat that often. Oh, where did that scratch come from, where did this and that? Just take those photos, have them on hand, and I keep them on hand for a while. I'll upload them somewhere, put it on Google Drive, put it on Dropbox, something like that. Keep them on hand for a while in case they try to come back and say anything, for sure. So we'll get into the ceramic coatings here for a few minutes here. The biggest claim to fame, Parker and I have done some on gel coat surfaces for sure. I think we've done like maybe 6 boats just last year alone, where it's like a full restoration,
Yeah.
on boats that will look like this, that bad, and be able to bring them back in ceramic coat. A lot of times the ceramic coatings out there now, they don't really recommend them. You can be done, but they're not recommended to go on this bad of oxidized states, because once again, it's so far gone that gel coat's old, it can be thin, it's getting spongy, and then that ceramic coating doesn't hold up, and then ceramic coating gets a bad name for it. It's not the ceramic coating's fault, it's just old gel coat, and it's hard to actually do something with it to get it to last that long. So where we would get the claim to fame is on pontoon boats. This is really an interesting example. So think metal. Not a lot of people speak about ceramic coating bare metal. So a pontoon boat's aluminum here. This would be a water line that you can see here that happens here. Just even in freshwater where Parker is, you wouldn't think, oh, it's freshwater, not that big of a deal. It's very hard, high mineral content water, reacts with the aluminum. And what's really interesting is if you were to do this in a traditional sense, you bring that boat in as an owner to a marine detailer, they're gonna acid wash it with aluminum brightener and whatnot, and it's gonna turn it and bleach that aluminum out, and it's gonna look like this. And oh look, we can still see that water line ghosted there. So it's almost like when you pull vinyl off a trailer or whatnot, your closed trailer, you still see that ghosting. It's a similar effect, if you will, because it's penetrated so deep and reactive with that aluminum, it's very hard to get that out unless you actually really see it or whatnot. Just doing it chemically, you would have to do a hydrofluoric acid aluminum brightener wash multiple times, and like I said, you possibly would even have to sand it. The claim to fame with ceramic coatings on aluminum, once again, look into it, they vary. Not a lot of them speak to bare aluminum coatings or whatnot, but this is a boat that we did here. This is a Tri-Tune. This is a, was it 28 crest?
28-foot crest with $2,400. Cool boat. At least where I'm at, super rare, because you're not going to see a lot of those floating around.
800 horsepower on a Tri-Tune boat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of juice for a boat like that.
This boat sits in Horsetooth Reservoir, just west of Fort Collins, my home lake. Puts it in 6 months straight. I mean, He just got that, so what we did is we ceramic coated the tunes before it ever went in the water. It came from Crest, we took it off the semi, put it right on the hoist, ceramic coated it, let it cure out 72 hours, let him go, put it in the water. So you can see we hadn't cleaned the motors yet or the tunes, but by design, to see the water line right here coming down, you see how clean it is on the top?
Yeah, this is actually, this white mark right here, that's a reflection of the building in the background. So
Yeah.
that's how shiny that is. You can see these little straights, those are actually underneath, so that's
It's
the rubber.
reflecting off of the tune.
That's the structure, so that's just give an idea of how shiny it is, but then the water line and all this growth. So that has been ceramic coated once again, about 6 months, sat in the water, brings it back after that to Parker to get clean.
Literally when I took this photo, he just took it off the truck and this is just sitting out in front of the shop. You go to the next photo here and you can see reflection in the building, and I know it's kind of deceiving in this picture, but there is no black line of death on that boat.
That's what that
There's
brings
no
it to,
reaction.
is that there is no permanent water line like you would have versus the traditional method.
And all that was, I pressure washed that with 3,500 PSI machine at 210 degrees, 5 gallons a minute. Literally just going, one section at a time, and then go through with LNR, rinseless, washed it, wiped it with a towel, done. Walked away.
So the fact that most people, pontoons, like, well, what is a pontoon business? They're building over 40,000 of these boats a year. It's the fastest segment of boat manufacturing. You think gel coat boats, fiberglass, center console, go fast boats. Fastest segment of boat manufacturing is pontoons and tri-toons right now. Because it's a versatile boat. You can take the family on it, you can go fast. Now this boat's going over 60 miles an hour in the water.
At 5,000 feet above sea level.
And he's got 5 guys. The guy who owns it is not a small guy. And he's got his family with a giant Yeti cooler on the front of this boat, still going over 60 miles an hour. So the point is, pontoons are growing, and the fact that this particular owner is like, it's such a shame that people will buy a boat that costs almost $200,000, which this boat does, and then when you see it, it looks like that previous boat here in a matter of no time. This would be 1 season out where Parker is. It would look
Easily.
like that.
Easily.
It just happens that fast. So the real benefit of ceramic coating in this case, that you could do it for the fastest growing segment of boats, I mean, that's a statement. The customer is very, very impressed with it, has told everybody about it, did a very nice Google review for Parker. It's really helped gain a lot of momentum. And that's a statement being that it looks better than factory in a lot of ways, because they come shipped to you with water spots and everything else, and they start to react just in the atmosphere. And the fact that it's still shiny on its own, I mean, that's good.
I got a question. I'm from Michigan, and we do a ton of boats up at
Sure.
mobile shops in Michigan. And we use a lot of the acid washers, just like what you're showing. We
Mhm.
have a lot of pontoon boats, just like you're talking about. But what my question is before, because I'm ceramic pro, I don't know if you want to talk about what ceramic you're using. right
That's
now.
fine. Oh, we
But what
wouldn't
steps
prefer,
are-
but
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I just really want to know what steps you took before you did the ceramic. So like you were saying, it came straight from the factory. Did you do some polishing before you coated it?
No, that's what's pretty incredible about this particular coating here. We don't really want to advertise or whatnot on behalf of IDA or whatnot, but it's just the fact that when it comes to you, normally it would have water spots and whatnot built on there. So what we would do is take something like a vinegar, even just a mild acid. That way you don't bleach the aluminum out, keep that natural aluminum finish, and you can do a white Scotch-Brite pad with it, with vinegar. You can buy 30% vinegar too, and it won't really react too bad with it. But you'll see what they call a mill finish aluminum. When they come from the factory, they'll have very, very minuscule looking lines in it. So you just find that line, if it's a lateral, like horizontal to the ground, or if it's vertical, and just maintain that line with your Scotch-Brite, clean it real well. Then what we do from there with that vinegar is we just wipe it dry, and we coat it, and it's done. We don't have to do anything else at that
We
point.
panel wiped it before we coated it on.
But you can literally coat over just the vinegar as well. On a gel coat boat, we might do a panel wipe or whatnot, but on this particular case, we could just wipe that vinegar off with a dry microfiber and coat.
So did you ceramic the whole entire thing or just the tunes?
Just the tunes on that.
Just the tunes on that, we don't have the other picture, but the front, on the bow, there's some ceramic coating. We also did coating on the cover on that
Did
particular
you go
boat.
up underneath and do the whole tune all the way or just for the first?
All the way around, yep,
All the way
yep.
around?
It's 10.
Yep.
So,
We'll wrap that up there.
No,
quickly,
Was it-
interior on
Is there another question?
any quick recommendations on mold on the vinyl seats that's stubborn?
So- It's interesting because a lot of times in the vinyl, it's, you're seeing something that appears what is not actually, you're not seeing what you think you're seeing. You think you're seeing the mold on top of the seat, okay? A lot of times what is happening is permeating through the foam and it's coming up from the bottom side of the vinyl. Now, some guys will say take a magic eraser, use whatever. What you're actually doing is sandpapering the vinyl to visually remove the mold, but you're actually not, mitigating it whatsoever. Once that,
That's really a complete class.
It
We taught it last
is.
year.
It's
a
a
good
boondoggle.
question, but we're at the end of the class, so but
It's tough. So
that's where you can contact Parker.
yeah, you guys
for more
send me an
information.
email, give me a call, I'll give you some cards. Yes.
Just a quick question, what about spider shit?
It's not something that I see a lot.
South Louisiana, we have a lot of them.
Yeah. I'll be honest, it's a problem that I have not seen, at least where I'm at. So.
For continued education credit for certified detailers, with the new website, you can log on and you can log your credits yourself, so make sure you guys do that. It's a new process this year. We don't have like a sign-in sheet. I'm Jonathan, I'm the incoming president for the IDA. You guys have a chance to come